You can sit down here because we're going to do 5 minutes of opening. Yes, I do. Give me 1 second. Morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Lisa Moon. I'm the president and CEO of the Global Food Banking Network. Very excited to be here with you today. As many of you have figured out, we do have headphones. They are not for translation, they're for amplification because we're one of many invigorating events going on this morning. And we are also being live streamed as well. So I want to thank you all just for joining us. We've done sessions like this on food loss and waste now since COP28 in Dubai, and we're really excited to talk about how traction on this issue has been growing and changing, especially over the past couple of years. And GFN, the Global Food Banking Network, is convening this session today with our partners, WRAP and ReFed, and as well as the groups in the Food Loss and Waste Global Action Drive. And this includes groups such as the World Resources Institute, Global Methane Hub, SDSN, WWF, China Agricultural University, and others. So we want to kick off this morning to really talk about where progress is happening on food loss and waste at the global, the national, the subnational, and the non-state actor levels. What is driving this action, and how can we see more of it in the years to come? We know that food loss and waste is damaging. The most recent Eat Lancet report reports that 20% of agricultural land use and 20% of water withdrawals from the food system is all going to produce food that is never eaten. In total, we know that 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions are a result of food loss and waste, and much of these emissions are methane, which is very damaging. And we also know that foods with some of the highest nutritional content, such as fruits and vegetables, legumes, pulses, these are often those that are wasted most frequently. And all of this is occurring because while we have 2.4 billion people worldwide that cannot afford a healthy diet. So our esteemed panel this morning is going to discuss what the solutions we have seen pushing forward have been. We know that today food systems is one of the 6 pillars on this COP agenda, which in and of itself is very exciting, thanks to the work of many people in this room. We know that governments are recognizing food systems in their NDCs and in decarbonization plans. And this is good progress, but more can be done. Before I introduce our first speaker, I just want to make a quick note about our experience with this at GFN. We really believe that non-state actors have a critical role to play in informing and supporting this action. So GFN is one such player in this. We are uniting local food redistribution organizations across 50 plus countries. And these organizations are working with the private sector, farmers all the way down to food service, to identify nutritious surplus food and then recover it so it's accessible to people that do not have access to food. And we are an entirely privately funded network. Last year, about 38 million people accessed food through our network, and the emissions avoided due to food rescue was the equivalent of taking about 400,000 cars off the road. Today, due to a partnership with the Global Methane Hub, food banks are using a rigorous methodology to measure their social and their environmental impact. And the data tells us that for every ton of food that is redistributed, 2 to 3 tons of greenhouse gas emissions are avoided. And it's this data that has led to governments increasingly incorporating food redistribution into their NDCs or their decarbonization plans. Governments such as Paraguay, Ecuador, and others are actually putting targets for emission reduction in place that is possible due to food banks and the collaboration they have with the private sector. So it's been an amazing breakthrough thanks to the players of many people in this room that today we can very rigorously estimate the impact that redistribution can have on both food access as well as greenhouse gas emission avoidance in 2030, 2040, and 2050 if funding is available. And this is slated to have good environmental and social wins. And so I'm very glad even that one of our members is here today, Seski Mesa Brazil. Claudia is here, and we'll be talking a bit about this later in this session. So we are also going to have a first-hand chance this week to see kind of what food redistribution can look like and the impact that can have with a session we're having with Seski on Thursday night from 4 to 6 p.m. Michael Oko can invite you. There will be food and drinks that are cold. So it is examples like this that we want to highlight today. And so I want to go ahead and move to our first speaker, who's going to be talking a bit about the perspective on these issues from her angle. I'm so delighted to have Martina Otto here. She is the head of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition and needs no other introduction. Martina, thanks for being here. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. It was actually meant to be Ruth Couto, my colleague in the UN Environment Program, who is the Deputy Director of Climate, and she had to. Well, I have to excuse her for family reasons, actually. So, but it's a pleasure to be here because this work is very close to my heart. Not only the CCIC is also working on the topics, but also in UNEP, I was leading beforehand that team that is putting together the Food Waste Index. And so it's a pleasure to be back in this space. So thank you very much to our exceptional partners to the Global Food Banking Network, RAP, ReFed, for bringing us here together. Your leadership and collaboration is really instrumental in turning food waste challenge into real measurable climate action and supporting the advancement of the SDG 12.3. And obviously, Lisa already mentioned a few points. The scale of food loss and waste is really alarming, and she gave us a few numbers. We have them in the index as well. And if we look at the fact that 1 billion tons of food each year is wasted, that's a fifth of all food available to consumers, and on top of this, another 13% that is lost before it's reaching the retailers. So from post-harvest through storage and processing stages, that means we lose 1/3 of all food produced. And that is a huge loss of resource, everything that went into it, from the labor, the production, the money. So it's a business, that's lost. It's just a cost factor on the one side, and obviously it's socially and morally unacceptable because we have 730 million people who still remain hungry. So we have that, and obviously it's a factor contribute. Not only we're not feeding people, but we're feeding climate change, and that's due to the impact on, largely the methane as well, which is a very potent greenhouse gas, not only that, it's a precursor to tropospheric ozone, which is harming plant growth. So it's actually a negative feedback loop, which will then impact the agricultural sector very much. So aside of being also health harming. So it's a lose-lose-lose if we don't address it, but it can be a win-win-win if we do. And that's what we have to do, pulling together. And really it's all of us, and I just want to hold that thought as well. Households are the largest source of this waste, responsible for 60%, with an average of 79 kilograms of food wasted per person every year. And I think that's an average person's weight, I guess, and that's telling us something as well. I want to dispel another myth, and that is that this is only a rich world problem. It's not. It's a problem everywhere. It's universal. Food waste levels are similar across high, middle, and low-income countries. We just need to keep in mind that the composition is different and the underlying reasons why we see it happening is different. And that's important because that will lead our actions as well. So on the one side, access to cold chain, for example, access to storage, but also on the other side, a behavioral shift that is absolutely needed. I have to advance a bit faster. The impact is pretty clear. Why we need to act is clear. We have a commitment with SDG 12.3 that's been out there for some time. And unfortunately, although it's such a no-brainer to take action in this space, we're not making enough progress on it. And there's probably a few reasons for that. One is, I think we have to take it into a whole sort of no organic waste objective as well, so lifting it up out of what is maybe perceived as a niche to make it bigger while not losing the focus, don't get me wrong. And that's something that we're doing here thanks to the Brazilian leadership as well under the Action Agenda 15. We have no organic waste as an acceleration plan, where the food waste breakthrough that we're launching as well this week is a strong part of. There's a few other components all the way to dump site closure. I won't get into the details of that, but I think we're creating a bigger partnership, more actors who would put it on their flag and go for action. We do see progress, and that's the good news as well. Japan has reduced, for example, food loss and waste by 53% since 2000, 58% in business, 46% in households, placing its 2030 target well within reach. And the business goal of 60%, by the way, has already been achieved. Brazil has made it a real cornerstone, and I won't get into Brazil because we'll have Adalberto here, and he will tell us firsthand. The UK as well has done amazing action on this, and we've shown the data on that, and I'm very proud because Brazil and the UK are our co-chairs, so can't claim a lot of credit for this, but it's just it wasn't lost on me. So the food waste breakthrough, I just alluded to it. That's a way of turning ambition into implementation. UNEP, together with the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions and partners present here, is launching this week this food waste breakthrough. The idea is it's a 5-year plan for government, cities, food business and stakeholders to cut 50% of food waste by keeping food out of landfills, resulting in a reduction of up to 7% of global methane emissions. And that's a big ticket, and we have to give ourselves the means to do that. The breakthrough will be launched tomorrow at 9:30 in the thematic hub 4. So please join us and learn more about this. And as I said, it's embedded in the no organic waste, which follows an avoid, divert, valorize, and infrastructure sort of element that builds on last COP's road declaration, reducing organic waste, and it's the first pillar, avoid. So the time to act is now. We have a lot of good examples that will be presented throughout the session, and I'll hand over to those. But really, it's a call to working together. I think the reason why is very clear. We know what to do. The technologies are there. Behavioral change is always difficult, but together, I think we can. We have the right partners here. There's innovation. There's business opportunities in it. So we're not alone in putting it out as a moral sort of something, but there's a business opportunity, a business case behind that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. We'll look forward to that breakthrough session tomorrow, I believe. I now want to actually invite to the stage Marcelo Mena. He is the CEO of the Global Methane Hub and is a leading voice on super pollutants and the connections between food loss and waste and climate change. Marcelo, we'd love to hear from you what you are expecting or want to see at this COP and your thoughts on moving forward. Please.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it's great to see everybody here, people that have been working on this topic for so long. So the first thing I think is important to bring up is that we know that we're not going to reach 1.5 without addressing the food system's emissions, which are a major problem. But half of those actually come from food that nobody ever eats, and that's really unacceptable. And it's because it didn't get to the market, it may be because it was spoiled, maybe because it was in the organic waste. And so it was really important to start seeing where these emissions were actually happening. And that's why the work of REFED and GFN, to be able to look at what the avoided emissions are from organic waste reaching a landfill, we're. And so therefore we needed to start prioritizing. And so now we know that it's not all food decomposes and causes the same emissions. We all know that the life cycle emissions of each food is different. A lot of it's concentrated in a certain sector of categories, and so we could prioritize. But also, we started seeing that the organic waste issue was causing a problem, and the trajectory is as young as the global methane pledge, I would say. The global methane pledge 4 years ago. But 3 years ago, we started showing that landfills were actually the major super emitters of methane globally, more than many times the oil and gas sector that had been, pointed to before. And we had a study that showed that we presented a study that showed that the four major emitters were in developing countries. And since then, the following year, we launched Low Methane Partnership, which is to reduce those emissions in the landfills. But then last year, building on that one, reducing organic waste was launched by the COP29 presidency. And it really built a really interesting coalition. Countries that weren't even in the methane pledge and wouldn't ever join the methane pledge were part of this reducing organic waste initiative. And having seen that we are trying to fix landfills and we're trying to reduce organic waste, it really should be clear that organic waste really shouldn't be in a landfill at all. And so there should be no organic waste at all. And so this new initiative that was launched yesterday by Alberto Maluf, now bringing it all together under one umbrella. But this is also to look at the opportunity. If we do this organic waste diversion, we could reduce the 1/10 of a degree by 2050 from this diversion. But it's done at a much more human scale that has so many more benefits that we really don't recognize. It's interesting because the Latin American countries, and last week we also, UCLA launched the top emitting landfills in the world. 9 of them are in Latin America of the 25, and many of them in Brazil, and in Chile, and in Colombia. So we have a problem that's caused by this middle income issue that, many times the organic waste issue in other places that it's not collected, it's not really in a place so you can't see it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. But the reality is, in the developing world, this is where the emissions are going to rise significantly. But since the decomposition happens faster, the avoided emissions actually result in a lower temperature faster too. So that's really important to know. And so last couple of weeks ago, the Latin American group through UNEP committed the 33 countries to do organic waste ban from landfills by 2040. And having been at the Chile side of things, which is actually going through this, there's a lot of questions that come up with this organic waste ban, because there's increased waste management cost that somebody needs to answer. Right now, the law that we're doing is actually stuck in the Committee of Finance, and the mayors are saying, well, who's going to pay for this? But then that's why we need to start showing the different real costs of inaction. And the real cost of inaction is that the landfill that everybody has idealized to be very cheap doesn't exist anymore. It's always far, there's congestion, and the real costs are actually much bigger. So having solutions that are actually closer are actually a lot more cost effective than people realize. And one example of that I saw in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, in which the trash truck goes and gets stuck in traffic for 2 hours, and that's a whole bunch of fuel cost and very inefficient cost. And then they have these smaller composting facilities very nearby where the waste is generated, with the inclusion of the waste pickers that are actually operating them. And an example of that is this COP, in which, with all its problems with the logistics, the organic waste is collected and is being treated in a facility with operators from waste pickers that are actually using some technology that isn't from the global north necessarily. Actually, the big idea is actually in places like Korea. In Korea, they probably had a space issue for landfills, and they started doing organic waste diversion, and they developed a whole bunch of technologies that are much more sophisticated, right? And so, just to put it to the extreme, maybe some of you have a LOMI, or a food cycler, which is a dehydrator that is in your home. Actually, if you do the numbers of marginal cost of abatement of that very expensive piece of appliance, it's like $20 a ton, which is not bad. And so clearly we could do better than that, right? I mean, if we make it something like snob and marginal and it's got the Vitamix motor, maybe it costs $400. But that stuff, there's no reason why this composting dehydrator shouldn't cost $50, right? If we really put to it. And so like even at the small scale at an apartment, that volume reduction could happen significantly. And that's a little bit of what's going on here in Belen, in which they're doing an accelerated composting facility that uses 1/4 of the space of a typical composting facility. And when retail and space is so important and trash doesn't pay rent, this is something that is really driving a lot of investments in the retail sector too. The food loss and waste issue is treated many times in restaurants. And so we need to look at those things and look at the but there's also some institutional barriers. Who owns food waste, right? And this is a challenge I've had when we're trying to get the food banking regulation passed in Chile. Who owns it? Is it the Ag Ministry? Is it the Economy Ministry? Is it Environment? And so this sort of problem is actually causing the inaction that we see, because everybody knows how big this is, but nobody's really breaking across those barriers. And it'd be great to have ag ministers talking about that too, right? They want to talk about increased production, but what about reducing food loss too? And so the real thing about this though is that this can bring inclusion and bring food security. And it's actually a lot more cost effective than people realize when you take everything into account. And this afternoon, I'm going to be presenting the emergency brake solutions paper that I'm publishing on a personal note, and which actually shows that all the different measures in which food banking and food loss and waste recovery is one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce temperature in the short term. And it creates 3 times more jobs than the highly mechanized Global North solutions. It also brings a great sense of pride, because the reality is, when you're in climate weeks everywhere else, it wasn't until last year that New York had organic waste diversion and treatment. And so this is something that means that we don't have to wait for a sustainable solution. We could cut across to it directly. We don't have to do the path that we know will lead to more cost, more pollution, and more status quo. So that's what I wanted to bring here, and so that we could actually have a true circular economy. So hopefully that will allow us to pull the emergency brake and reduce temperature faster than any other way. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. It's my pleasure also now to welcome Alberto Maluf, the National Secretary of Urban Environment, Water Resources and Environmental Quality, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Brazil. Alberto, I know you are juggling a very, very busy agenda this morning, and thank you for spending a few moments with us talking about your very exciting new announcement from yesterday. Please.
Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, especially to talk on a topic that is such important for Brazil and for our president. When Lula was elected 20 years ago, he said his priority was that all Brazilians would have 3 meals per day. And Brazil succeeded at that time to reduce poverty, the social desiguity, fighting hunger. After the pandemic period, once again, we had millions of Brazilians with food insecurity, more than 10% with extreme or moderated food insecurity. But in just 2 years, supported by the president's leadership, we were able once again to take out Brazil from the hunger map, and reducing food loss and promoting, familiar agriculture and other things. We're definitely on the heart of this. We know that to reduce food loss and waste, it's not something that only one stakeholder can do it. We need many stakeholders working together. We need, of course, the federal governments to coordinate, to integrate, to bring all stakeholders together. But we need the private sector. We need the farmers. We need the retailers. We need everybody on board. But more and more, especially in our case, we are realizing that we need the subnational governments leading the way, especially the mayors. We just approved our second national strategy on reduce of food waste, and just a couple months ago. This one has already measured the results from the first 10 years of the first strategy. there were a lot of achievements, but we realized that we still didn't have too much clear targets, and we didn't had a easier selection of which are the sectors you should prioritize. So we just finished and launched it, actually yesterday, here at COP30. We're launching everything at COP30, yeah. We launched our Planado, the national plan for reducing and recycling organic waste, supported by the Global Methane Hub, RAP, UNAP, and Policy Institute. This policy, for the first time, it sets up very clear targets and the sectors we're going to focus on year per year. It brings the subnational governments at the heart of the strategies. I don't know how much you know about Brazilian NDC, but Brazilian NDC have set the cities as the implementer of our NDCs. We approve our CHAMP, our multilateral governance structure strategy, inside our NDC. And when we had our national strategy for climate, later we did our sectoral plans for climate, in which agriculture is one of it, waste is one, cities, all of them are there. But we realized that we need a more operational program. So we created this Green Resilient Cities program, getting the federal, state, and cities, everybody together, everybody with the same power to decide. They decide the agenda, the budget. We changed our climate fund to finance these projects. So creating this multi-governance, intersectoral approach that also has the private sector and civil society, we were able in less than 1.5 years approve a national plan with targets for the green resilient cities, and food waste and increasing recyclability, composting, also the organic part, became one of these targets that was approved by everybody. And now our climate fund is supposed to finance the projects that will deliver on that solution. So COP30, as we heard, brought food security and at the heart of it. We know that we're going to have to adapt a lot in our agriculture systems, not only because they are a huge source of emission, but because they're going to face a very difficult situation. Water scarcity is probably one of the most challenging things we are facing. Brazil has one of the largest water resources in the world. I think the second largest. But it's the number one of fresh water available to close. But it's completely not very well distributed. Some places like here in the Amazon, you have a lot of water. Well, you can see and you can feel every day. But at the metropolitan regions in our cities, we are having more and more challenge for water. And water is in the heart of our adaptation strategy. But water is also about food security, because majority of our food production are done around the cities. And they're facing now more and more this competition between water for human consumption and water for agriculture. So reducing food waste and food loss, for sure, is the easiest way for us to start an effective adaptation process that can bring us to where we need. As we heard also before, waste and food waste together represents almost 10% of the emissions, which is more than the transportation sector. We know how hard it would be for fossil fuel phasing off. Even today we had a lot of meetings to try to get a roadmap of phasing off fossil fuel. I tell you, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy. But food loss and food waste improves people's life, improve our economy. It's good for social. It's good for the environment. And we have a lot of stakeholders trying to do it. And if we coordinate better, I think we could achieve it. Thank you.
Alberto, thank you so much for those remarks and congratulations again on yesterday's announcement. I think it's a model that we're all hoping that will be replicated. So it's my pleasure now to welcome Christy Lopper. Christy is the Environmental Program Director for the Robertson Foundation. And Robertson has been a supporter of food loss and waste action for many years, including the launch of the Philanthropy Roadmap, COP28 2 years ago in Dubai. And now, of course, Robertson is a supporter of the Global Action Drive, which is really looking to bring together a lot of the groups working to prevent and reduce food loss and waste. So, Christy, thanks for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning. Bon dia. Thank you so much for including me this morning. I'm here from the Robertson Foundation. We're a family foundation based in New York City. And we've been funding climate work for about 25 years. But we're actually quite new to food, just about 2 years in. And we started focusing on food following the passing of our founder just about 3 years ago in a major strategic overhaul. So our kind of main areas of focus now are twofold. One is the fossil fuel to clean energy transition in Latin America. So a lot of relevant conversations at this meeting. We also, our second focus is on food systems transformation, starting in the US, but with an eye towards global priorities. And within food systems, we do focus on food loss and waste and a shift towards healthy and sustainable diets. And we are excited to focus on food for a few reasons. One is, as you all know, it is very underfunded, especially when compared to other climate solutions. The second is there's a ton of potential for really exciting work if the funding is just there. It actually is an issue where funding can make a difference. It's not so much an issue of political will. And then third, the exciting thing that we found about food that you all know is when you compare kind of food systems transformation to energy transition, the map just isn't there in the same way. We can't say that energy transition, it's not like mission accomplished, but we know the steps that we need to take and the transition is underway. For food systems transition, we're still, drawing the map, and in some cases it feels like we don't even have a compass. As we began this work and started talking to funders and advocates, that lack of a compass was really evident. We would talk to people and they would say, we would ask someone kind of, what is your priority for reducing emissions? And they'd say, regenerative agriculture. That is the only thing you should be funding. Don't listen to anybody else. If you care about emissions reductions, it's regen. And then we'd go and talk to somebody else and they'd say, those regen guys don't know what they're talking about. You got to fund alternative proteins. And it was confusing as kind of a new funder in the space. And as we know, the reality is it's an all of the above approach. Can you just go back a couple? Yeah. The reality is that it's an all of the above approach. All of these solutions need priority. So we really started thinking about, okay, how do we bring new funders, especially climate funders, into the food space? And we are hearing that we needed a little bit more of a guide. So just last month, we launched a new guide, Transforming Food Systems for People, Nature, and Climate, an Introduction to Climate for Climate Philanthropy. This was Robertson Foundation alongside Gates, Bezos Earth Fund, High Tide Foundation, Porticus, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. And we did it in partnership with a consulting firm called Susan Bell and Associates and a group called Climate Lead, which you guys may have heard of. They're tasked with bringing in new climate money from kind of new families and new donors, and they've raised $5 billion to date. And what we were hearing from them is that they had new funders who were interested in food, but they just didn't know where to start. So that's what this was all about. So next slide. The guide leverages 5 pathways, and it's improve how we farm, support small-scale farmers, protect and restore nature, waste less food, and shift to healthy and sustainable diets. And we're not suggesting that everybody needs to do everything. We're only funding in those kind of last 2 categories. But what we're suggesting is that it's really helpful that if you're working in this space, you're cognizant of how your work connects to these other areas. So we fund healthy and sustainable diets, which in theory can help free up land that could be used for carbon sequestration. But if you don't do that protect and restore nature piece, those benefits can be lost. And then finally, one cool feature of this, if you go to the next slide, there is an illustrative but not exhaustive list of examples of organizations who are working at the intersection of climate and food, including a number of groups in this room: ReFed, Global Methane Hub, WRAP, World Resources Institute, Again, not the full list, but just giving funders a place to start. So this is not available online because it's like a funder's guide, but if anyone wants a copy, if you give me your contact information, I'm happy to share it with you. Thank you.
Perfect. Chrissy, thank you so much. It's now my pleasure to welcome Professor Shenggen Fan. And Dr. Fan is the chair professor and dean China Agricultural University. He is also on the board of directors for the Global Food Banking Network. He's been deeply involved in the CG system for many, many years and was director general of the International Food Policy and Research Institute for a decade. So Shenggen, we're really glad you're here. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Good morning. I just wanted to add a couple points that have already been discussed. The number one is, in addition to the positive impact on environment and climate, I think on human development, particularly by solving lack of micronutrients. 5 billion people in the world is suffering from lack of micronutrients, iron, zinc, vitamin A, iodine, and so on. I think reducing food waste and loss can really help to address that issue. Because wasted food, lost food, are usually have lots of micronutrients, vitamin A, zinc, iron, and so on. So that's one point I wanted to really emphasize. The second is a policy, policy, where we discuss why we have made much progress as we wish. I think we messed up with policy. Market fails to deliver social, environmental, and manage with nutrition health impact. Market cannot deliver that. So if you want to correct the market, it's a policy. So I have worked for International Food Policy Risk Institute for 25 years. I think correcting policy failure is so critical. Now here, to correct the policy, we need to understand political economy issues of reducing food waste and loss. Not everybody in the system or the value chain will benefit from reducing food waste and loss. For example, the producers, smallholders, will not benefit from reducing food waste loss. If you reduce food waste loss, what happens? The farmers should produce less. There's no incentive. So there's a policy issue. Can we use some of the benefits from reducing food and waste loss to compensate farmers, smallholders? So this is a very tricky, this is a very important element for correcting the policy failure. Another policy failure is smallholders can adopt lots of, let's say, practices to reduce carbon emission, including methane emissions. And by reducing loss, so we're talking about the waste, but loss is also very important. But they don't have any incentive to do that. Although it's socially optimal, it is environmentally optimal to do that. Again, can we compensate them if they reduce water use, if they reduce loss, if they reduce carbon emissions? Now, another point I wanted to make is innovations. Well, before I do that, actually, the Next Nation policy. Brazil introduced Next Nations at central, local levels. China also reduced lots of laws, regulations. Anti-waste law was passed 2 years ago. Now they actually go to the developing implementation plan. So all this is great. More countries have done that. But I think we still needed to find how we're going to measure, to track the progress, how we're going to make sure that different levels of government are accountable for that. For example, if you are wasting food, are you going to jail? Are you going to be, let's say, fined? Right now, no. You can always introduce to the laws regulations. If you don't have the accountability system, you have no ways to fix a problem. So now, the last point I wanted to mention that there is great opportunity. That's innovations. We have heard enough innovations. I just wanted to give you 2 examples from China. Alibaba is working with Hema. Hema is a fresh fruits, vegetable supermarket. So they have worked together to use digital revolution, AI technology, to link smallholders to final consumers. So by doing that, Alibaba was able to reduce food loss and waste from 30% to 10%. Some numbers even 8%. Another good example is my university, China Agricultural University. We have introduced AI restaurant, AI food services for our students. So when you use a tray to pick up the food from buffet table. The AI will automatically record the cost, the carbon emissions, and also nutrition content, proteins, fat, and calories and so on. And we observed some initial study indicates that the students reduce their food loss waste by almost 90%. We have been telling students, oh, you need to waste food. It's not easy for farmers to put it. They never listen. But the introduction of this technology really disrupt their behavior. So I will stop here. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining this effort. I'm part of the 12.3 champion. So let's work together.
Thank you so much, Shenggen. And now I want to invite our last speaker, and then we're going to have a quick discussion with the panel. I'm very pleased to have Gonzalo Munoz here. So Gonzalo is the high-level champion for COP25. He is the co-founder of Ambition Loop. He is a leading voice. We would not have enough hours in the day, but Gonzalo, we are so thrilled to have you here with us, and he is also here at COP30.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank to all of the food bank friends gathered here today. I think that we have definitely heard about how evident this topic is a no-brainer from every single perspective. Like it's not only a no-brainer, I'm always asking myself, like, who loses in the equation of solving it, right? So it seems like a win-win-win-win. Everyone loses, like, okay, maybe the owner of the landfill, no, because they will have the landfill for longer. Maybe the guy or the people that is transporting the waste, no, they can transport to the composting facility or the biodigester. Like, you can make this really be relevant for everyone and create so much positive impact. So for me, food waste and loss is not only immoral, it's absolutely inefficient. It creates, of course, the damage that we know. So it's an expression of stupidity. It's something that if we think that we are an intelligent species, we should solve it right away. So even for an ego perspective, let's solve it. We're looking so bad, right? And let me refer a little bit on why we're talking about this today here at COP. So not that long ago, if I might go back to at least 2019, when I joined as a high-level champion, I'm coming from the food sector. I was quite surprised how lack of knowledge of the food sector in general was present in the climate discussions. It was kind of absent. And for me, like, okay, I know that we have to reduce the emissions, but I know very much about photosynthesis. I know very much about the problem and the opportunities that food system can aggregate for the climate solutions. So we started positioning very slowly up to when I would say Dubai, COP28, positioning it very strongly into the agenda. So of course, based on progress that many others did in the past. We had the Cornivia, we had, of course, the Glasgow commitment on stopping deforestation. We have several, and of course, we have the land use action agenda on the market strategy. We have lots of work. That nothing comes from